Hello and welcome into the backfield. I'm your host Connor Schaff, and today I will be talking about what has been such a contentious topic over the last couple of days, and it's about whether the committee snubbed Notre Dame from making the playoffs. And through this, we are also going to talk a bit about Notre Dame's reaction to getting left out to the playoffs and about the state of college football as a whole. Now, this is going to overall be quite a negative video. And I want to say I'm still very excited for the college football playoffs. I'm still very excited for the football we have to come. But we do need to talk about what has transpired because it is a mess. The committee has acted disgracefully. I think that Notre Dame in response has acted disgracefully. I think a lot of people online have acted like children in this situation, and I think we need to sit down and just breathe and have a normal conversation about the issues here. So we're going to start off this by talking about whether Notre Dame got snubbed in itself. And the answer is no. In no way did Notre Dame get snubbed. Notre Dame, if you watch any of my videos from the past 2 months, did not deserve to be in the playoffs in the first place. Now, two things can be true at once. Notre Dame is a top 5 team in the country. I firmly believe that to be the case. In fact, if you go watch my college football playoff predictions video from this Sunday, right before the rankings were released, I had Notre Dame making the college football playoff semifinals. I think that this Notre Dame team is a very, very good football team and among the best in the country. I think they are more likely to win a national championship than teams like Ole Miss, teams like Texas Tech, teams like Oregon. And honestly, I think that they should be very disappointed they missed out on the playoffs. But to say that they got snubbed is not the correct way of putting it, because if you saw those rankings without seeing any of the rankings previous, nobody would have batted an eye. Alabama has a way better resume than Notre Dame. Alabama has wins over the number 2 team in the country. They have wins, or the number 3 team in the country, I apologize. They have wins over the number 14 team in the country. And they have wins over 2 teams that are probably 26 and 27 in the rankings in Tennessee and Missouri. And Miami has a head-to-head win over Notre Dame. I'm not sure how clear that can be. Miami deserves to be in the playoffs over Notre Dame. So that's not really the conversation we're going to focus on. We'll probably focus on the conversation of Notre Dame versus Alabama a little more, because I don't see any conversation about whether Miami should have been in the playoffs over Notre Dame. That's just obvious to me. But let's take a look at our final 12 teams we got. Now, I've seen a lot of people talking about that the group of 5 shouldn't have spots in the playoffs. They should split off to their own playoff, and I could not disagree more with that. Let's take a look at last year. Boise State was the number 7 team in the country. I think they finished the year at number 9, which means they would have been in the 12-team playoff whether they were a Power 4 team or a Group of 5 team. Then we watched that team go in the playoffs, and I get the score got away from them in the end. But if you watch that game through, Notre Dame or Boise State stayed competitive with Penn State for 3/4 of that game. Let's take a look at this Tulane team, though, this year. This Tulane team beat the ACC champions Duke. Tulane beat a mid-tier Big Ten team in Northwestern. Northwestern is a bowl-eligible team this year, and they beat them in the Big Ten. Tulane, one of their 2 losses came to a top 6 Ole Miss team. And yes, they got absolutely crushed in that game. But that doesn't mean that Tulane doesn't deserve to be in the playoffs. You know who also got destroyed in games? Alabama. Oklahoma, Oregon. Really just those three. Those three teams got crushed in games that they played in. Now, there might be more of a conversation to have here with James Madison. I actually think that if I was a betting man, I would bet that Tulane will be within, I think the mark is 17.5 points against Ole Miss. I think that game will be closer than people think. James Madison, I don't think that game will be close at all. And I think that you can make a bit more of an argument about. But at the end of the day, I don't think that that's the task of hand we have. Now, this is the problem that we have here, is that the committee had to decide how much do we care about head-to-head record and how much do we care about conference championship games. And the committee, in the end, pretty much decided at the buzzer beater, at the last second, head-to-head games matter and conference championship games mean absolutely nothing. And I know that people are super pissed off that Ohio State dropped a spot because they lost their conference championship game. BYU dropped a spot because they lost their conference championship game. Virginia dropped spots because they lost their conference championship game. North Texas dropped a spot because they lost their conference championship game. So let's go case by case, and let me explain why that argument is incredibly stupid. Literally, Ohio State just dropped a spot because Indiana moved up. That it's not a remotely comparable situation of a team dropping. BYU is probably the easiest one you can argue that BYU shouldn't have dropped, but the committee clearly is not like BYU, and if anything, BYU should feel so much more hard done by the committee this year than Notre Dame does. BYU has so much better of an argument to be in the college football playoffs than Notre Dame does. And I just don't... At the end of the day, the committee wanted to get Miami into the playoffs. That's clear. They wanted to get Miami in the playoffs, so they jumped BYU. BYU didn't... I predicted that BYU would drop behind Texas, and that didn't even happen. Then we look at Virginia. Virginia lost to an unranked team. It is not in any way a comparable scenario to losing to a number 3 ranked Georgia team. It just isn't. And North Texas literally just dropped a spot behind so James Madison can move up. So none of those 4 situations are teams actually dropping for anything beyond a valid reason. But let's take a look at the teams that won their conference championship games. Indiana jumped up 1 spot just ahead of the team that they beat in their conference championship game. Georgia didn't move at all. Texas Tech didn't move at all. Tulane didn't move at all. James Madison moved up 1 spot, and Duke still wasn't even ranked. And so please explain to me how you can punish teams for losing these games if you're not going to reward teams for winning the games. Because clearly the committee didn't. Now, I think we need to have a conversation about how the committee are treating these conference championship games. If these conference championship games don't mean anything, then why should we play them? Just give everybody the week off. But it's just... At the end of the day, you cannot punish Alabama for playing in a game that Miami didn't play in, that Notre Dame didn't play in. You cannot punish Alabama for that. That has to be a standard. And I think the committee got this right. If you saw these rankings without seeing last week's rankings, nobody would have said anything. And we'll talk about that a bit more because that is a problem within itself. And I think we'll go ahead and get right into it because at the end of the day, even though in no world did Notre Dame get snubbed, they are 100% right. The committee screwed over Notre Dame so hard because they gave Notre Dame a level of hope that they could make the playoffs by putting them so high week after week after week. Notre Dame were ranked at 8. They dropped behind Oklahoma once Oklahoma beat Alabama. Then they dropped behind Alabama for no particular reason. Alabama beat 5-7 Auburn. But realistically, Alabama should have been ahead in the first place. Alabama has a much better record than a much better resume than Notre Dame. And week by week, they moved Miami up from 15. Then they jumped Utah. Then they jumped Vanderbilt. Then they jumped Texas. Week by week by week, Miami moved up spot by spot until they put us in a situation last week where we knew that if BYU lost, Miami would be in the playoffs and Notre Dame would not be. You can go watch my video where I predicted every single college football playoff scenario. And I did not, in all 4 scenarios, whether between Georgia and Alabama winning their conference championship games and BYU and Texas Tech winning their conference championship games, not in one scenario did I have Notre Dame making the playoffs. There was no path to the playoffs for Notre Dame after the rankings last week. And that's after the committee spent the 4 or 5 weeks prior telling us how Notre Dame was on a different level compared to Alabama and Miami. So yes, Notre Dame should feel screwed over. The players should feel devastated, and the committee should be ashamed with themselves that they put themselves in this position. Every single week of the year leading up to this point, the committee cared more about the eye test than they did resumes. All of a sudden, last week, we saw the committee completely change course and start caring more about resume than eye test. Otherwise, Oklahoma would not be ranked that high. Alabama would not be ranked that high. Texas would be ranked higher. BYU would be ranked higher. Notre Dame would be ranked higher. But for whatever reason, the week before these rankings came out, the committee made the decision to change up their philosophy on the fly and ruin any consistency and destroyed any chance of Notre Dame making the playoffs. You have to remember, I am a college-age person. I'm sure you can tell from my voice. And I know from people I live around, and I know from the reaction I would have, these are virtually still children. You gave these 18 to 22-year-olds this dream that they would be in the college football playoffs with no reason to think that they wouldn't be in. And you took that away from them. Whether rightly or wrongly, they should have never been in that position in the first place. The lack of consistency from the committee this year is disgusting, it's disgraceful, and I think it could be the end of the committee as we know it because of how poorly they handled themselves this year. The committee chairman has acted like a child anytime he's been on air. We knew that Miami would be in the playoffs over Notre Dame. He kept hinting at it and wouldn't say it. Just put Miami ahead in the first place. It is disgraceful behavior from the committee, how they acted this year. And yes, Notre Dame should absolutely feel hard done by. With that being said, there is no excuse for the reaction that Notre Dame has had either. So, Notre Dame sent out this message after the game, or after the rankings, that December 7th, 2025, as a team, we've decided to withdraw our name from consideration for a bowl game following the 2025 season. We appreciate all the support from our families and fans, and we're hoping to bring the 12th national title to South Bend in 2026, the 2025 Notre Dame football team. I understand. This was a very emotional time for the players, for the coaches, for the staff, for the athletic director, but this was not the right decision. You have just disallowed your players a chance to play in one final game of the season. You know what is a luxury in sports? To leave on your own terms. If you are a senior, which there are quite a few on Notre Dame, who this was going to be their final game of their career. They thought they would be in the playoffs, and they didn't make the playoffs. These people have no chance at the NFL. Maybe they'll get a tryout or two. But they're preparing for a life after football. And they'll have a chance to play in one more football game now. And you have denied them of that opportunity. I can't believe that they would make this decision. I understand that maybe at this point when they made this decision, the team was emotional and wanted to put their foot in the ground and make a statement. And I'm sure the players did have a word in that. But without pointing any fingers, I'm just going to use two people as an example just because they're the two most well-known people on Notre Dame's football team. CJ Carr and Jeremiah Love. CJ Carr will be back on this team next year. He's not going anywhere. This team next year will almost certainly make the playoffs. We'll talk about that in a moment. Jeremiah Love is going to the NFL draft. He wasn't going to play in a bowl game anyway. Let's say these two players were rallying the team saying that we have to make a statement. We need to show that we're protesting against college football by not playing in this game. Would you not feel peer pressured to not want to play in this game? And I want to preface this by saying that we have no idea what went down in the room. But it should not be the decision of the players in that moment, because these players are going to now regret for the rest of their lives that they didn't play in this game. No, it probably won't matter to CJ Carr. Probably won't matter to Jeremiah Love. Those people will play in the NFL. But to all the kids that aren't going to the NFL, that will end up having normal jobs, that is going to be something that they are going to regret the fact that they never got the chance to do more than anything. And that's what the Notre Dame staff has denied. And I think that Marcus Freeman is a great head coach in college football. But I think that he made an emotional decision, and the athletic director made an emotional decision that a lot of their players and a lot of their team are going to regret someday. And that is why I think they made the wrong decision. So I have a couple clips from the Dan Patrick show that I wanted to go over here. And this first one is talking about the athletic director's reaction to people saying that Notre Dame are being sour and being sore losers about not making the playoffs. So I think it's interesting to see what the Notre Dame athletic director himself has to say about this. So let's take a listen.
Casual fan hears this and says it's sour grapes. Notre Dame trying to be bigger than everybody, more important. You would say what?
Well, listen, everybody kind of wants to do right by their team. We felt like we did what we needed to do this season to earn a spot in the college football playoffs. We feel that we have one of the very best teams in the country. I think the majority of people who follow this sport so closely agree. Every indication we had from that first ranking suggested that committee agreed with us. We were always being compared to Alabama. We couldn't possibly have ended the year any better than we did. I get why people think it's sour grapes, but it's disappointment, Dan. I mean, this is, we take this seriously, as do other universities. And, the rankings can't just be musical chairs at some, fifth grade birthday party. They have to mean something. And to me, what happened to us really kind of was alarming.
So that is the Notre Dame athletic director pretty much saying that the committee denied them the opportunity to play in the playoffs. And my problem with this is he's taking absolutely zero accountability for how the Notre Dame football team played this year. Notre Dame does not deserve to be in the playoffs based on their resume. They lost to the only two top 15 teams that they played. Their best win is over number 16 USC, and they have no other top 25 wins. BYU also got snubbed from the playoffs. Let's take a look at BYU's resume for comparison. BYU has wins over the number 15, the number 18 team in the country, and their two losses. The committee has clearly shown that they don't care about college football or conference championship games. They didn't give teams any benefit, and they didn't really punish teams. And BYU, their only regular season loss was to number 4 Texas Tech. That is a significantly more compelling case to make the playoffs than what Notre Dame has. Notre Dame has no one to blame for not making the playoffs besides of themselves. He is completely right about how the committee treated him. But that doesn't mean you have the right to come and cry all day, every day. They're still talking about it, about how they didn't get into the playoffs. You know what a team that didn't make the playoffs that does what's right to their players does? Georgia, 12-0, plays in their conference championship game in 2023 and drops from 1 to 6. And they miss out on the playoffs for playing in a game that literally any other team could have played in. If they didn't play in that game, they would have been in the playoffs. And this was back when there was a 4-team playoff. You know what Georgia does? They go and play a New Year's Six bowl game and beat Florida State 63-3. Yes, I know that Florida State had nobody playing in that game, but Georgia clearly wanted to make a statement, and they did. That is what a good team culture does. That is what a team that feels hard done by does. They don't go on the internet and cry all day about it. And that's my issue with Notre Dame. Now, I think that Notre Dame's argument about their bowl, at least you can see both sides of the argument. Where I can't get behind them at all is with their argument about the ACC and how they feel ruined by their relationship with the ACC feels ruined because of what's happened. So let's just take a listen to this clip and see what the Notre Dame athletic director has to say about it.
What role did the ACC play in any of this, in your opinion?
Well, I would tell you, again, I have tremendous respect for Miami. Great team, great school. Their athletic director, Dan Radakovich, is a good friend, and all the teams in the ACC. Great, wonderful universities. We have no gripes about any of the schools in the ACC. But we were mystified by the actions of the conference to attack, their biggest, really, business partner in football and a member of their conference in 24 of our other sports. And I would tell you, Dan, I wouldn't be honest with you if I didn't say that they have certainly done permanent damage to the relationship between the conference and Notre Dame.
What do you mean?
Just we didn't appreciate the fact that we were singled out repeatedly and compared to Miami. Not by Miami. Miami has every right to do that. But it raised a lot of eyebrows here that the conference was taking shots at us. And, that's just not something we chose to do. We wouldn't choose to do that in the future, and people might disagree with us, but that's just not something that we'd be comfortable with. And again, we have no problem with any of these teams. These are all great teams. You look at those teams, Miami, like I said, great season. They beat us. You think about Alabama, nobody's had more success in college football over the last decade than Alabama. But then, you follow this sport so closely. Everybody was saying that we were one of a handful of teams that could win this whole thing. Yeah. And now we have 0% chance. Even Nick Saban, nobody knows more about college football maybe in the history of the world than Nick Saban. And he said it yesterday, like, how is Notre Dame not in this? I mean, everybody is just kind of confused and perplexed, and we don't have good answers for the kids on our team, for our student athletes.
Are you going to?
And this is what really gets me. This is where the behavior gets disgraceful for me. Of course, the ACC are going to be fighting for one of their teams to get in the playoffs. The second that Duke won the ACC, their conference champion had no path to the playoffs. But if you go on their Twitter, you know who they also attacked? Was James Madison, was Alabama, was BYU, was Oklahoma. They didn't single out Notre Dame. You know why they singled out Notre Dame is because their best team has a head-to-head victory over you. Literally, of course they're going to do it. If Miami didn't get this last spot in the playoffs, the ACC would have had 0 teams in the playoffs. I imagine this man knows the conference gets $4 million. Yes, $4 million per team they have in the playoffs. Are you telling me that the ACC wouldn't have fought for having a team in the playoffs when they would get $4 million for their team making the playoffs? They have no reason to fight for Notre Dame. Notre Dame is not in their football conference. In fact, Notre Dame has actively refused to join their football conference. If I was the ACC, I would cancel every single game with Notre Dame. I don't find it disgraceful that the ACC has acted that way. I find it disgraceful that Notre Dame and their athletic director would act this way. The ACC have every right to fight for their teams to make the playoffs. Just like the SEC commissioner said that 7 SEC teams should be in the playoffs. Is that a ridiculous claim too? 100%. But he's the SEC commissioner. Of course he's going to say that 7 teams should make the playoffs. If I was the SEC commissioner, I would think that Texas and Vanderbilt should be in the playoffs too. He's the SEC commissioner. If I'm the ACC, 100% I think Miami should be in the playoffs. 100%. I would have found it ridiculous and disgusting that Notre Dame was ranked ahead of us every single week. What is the conversation we're even having here? It's just like the way that Notre Dame and their program have been acting like children in the last 2 days is just, I cannot wrap my head around it. It is not okay to act like this. It just isn't. But let's take a look at going forward, because honestly, Notre Dame are just being gifted opportunities now. And I feel like I should preface this by saying I don't like Notre Dame. I'm sure that if you've watched my videos in the past, or if you've been watching this video so far, it's pretty easy to know. I don't like Notre Dame. I think that it's really infuriating that they get to stay as an independent team and get preferential treatment by playing a garbage schedule every single year and still making the playoffs. And I can say that while saying I think Notre Dame is a top 5 team in college football. I think that Notre Dame would have contended for the national championship this year. And I also don't think they deserve to make the playoffs. And I don't think that the committee should be giving any preferential treatment for a team that refuses to join a conference. Unfortunately for us, that's exactly what they're doing. As it got announced, and we can take a look at this Yahoo Sports post that's on your screen now, that Notre Dame will be assured of making the playoffs if it is ranked in the top 12 starting next year, according to Notre Dame AD Pete Bavacqua telling Yahoo Sports' Ross Dellinger. If the playoffs is expanded to 14 teams and 3 or more at-large berths added to the field, I don't understand. This post is nonsensical what it's saying. But Notre Dame, if they would, in that situation, if Notre Dame were ranked 13th or higher, they would be in the playoff field. Why should that be a rule? Why? Why are we giving Notre Dame this benefit for refusing to join a conference? Yes, Notre Dame are making so much more money off of their college football program because they're not in a conference. But why should we, this is a dictatorship of a sport we play in. Why are we letting Notre Dame do that? No other team can do it. Tell Notre Dame, join a conference or you're not allowed to make the playoffs. That's what should happen, in my opinion. And until it happens, Notre Dame will keep getting preferential treatment. And in absolutely unbelievable fashion, if Notre Dame are in the top 12, they will make the playoffs automatically. Which means even though Miami had a head-to-head win over Notre Dame would have made the playoffs because they're ranked in the top 12. What are we doing? That's not okay at all. That's an awful rule. I do sincerely hope that once the committee or once the NCAA ends up signing off on their new playoff format, which has to be signed off by the 4 major conference commissioners, that they get rid of that rule. I think there's a good chance it'll happen. I'm not sure how that ran through the system in the first place, but man, that's an awful rule, and I hope it doesn't happen. But you take a look at Notre Dame's schedule next year. Notre Dame plays 2 good teams. And in fact, Miami, there's a good chance they won't be as good next year. USC, there's a good chance they won't be as good next year. They're bringing in the number 1 recruiting class, but it'll probably take 2 or 3 years to get to that point. In addition, they play 3 away games. And those 3 away games are at Purdue, at North Carolina, and at Syracuse. What are we doing here? Why should Notre Dame will end up going 11-1 with this schedule and make the playoffs, even though teams like Texas have Ohio State on their schedule next year? And Texas is going to get punished for playing Ohio State, while Notre Dame is going to make the playoffs because they play a cakewalk of a schedule. We have to figure something out so that Notre Dame cannot just cakewalk their schedule every year and make the playoffs. It's not fun to watch. It's not good for the sport, and something has to change. So with all that being said, I think that the format will change, and there's a good chance that this will be the end of the College Football Playoff Committee. What we saw from the committee this year was one of the worst things I've seen in professional sports. And yes, at this point, college football is a professional sport. The athletes are paid. It is one of the worst things I've seen in professional sports ever. The committee has handled themselves in such a poor way that I'm not sure I see how the committee can exist going forward. I'm not necessarily sure it will change, but something will change. And something that will either be great for the sport or lead it even further down this rabbit hole. And I just hope and pray that this sport that is so fun to watch, I think if you ask the average American what their favorite individual sport to watch in America or individual sports league to watch in America, they would say college football. Because there's something different about college football. And I'm passionate about this sport, and I will continue to talk about it and continue to care about it. And all I can do is hope that college football has changed for the better. And what I've seen the past month in college football has lost me a lot of that hope. And I think for a lot of fans around the country it has too. But that's all I have for today. I know I mentioned at the beginning of the video this was going to be a pretty negative, pessimistic video, and it's not a video I'm happy to make, but a video that I feel necessary to make. And I really appreciate each and every one of you guys that managed to stick around for the 40 minutes of this video. It's and I'm very interested to hear what thoughts you have about it. What can we do to solve this problem? That's what I want to know. Is Notre Dame in the right? Is Notre Dame in the wrong? Is it somewhere in the middle, like I've kind of talked about? But I do really appreciate you guys watching this video. And please make sure to subscribe, like, comment down below, interact with the video in any way you can, because it all does help grow the channel. And this is just what I want to keep doing and keep growing the channel. So I do really appreciate that very, very much. But thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good one. Bye.